happened. This is Ukraine's capital. What seemed unthinkable in the 21st century is now underway.
War has returned to Europe. In the early hours of Thursday, Russian tanks and troops rolled across the border in a full-scale invasion.
The months-long build-up of Russian troops on the border with Ukraine has turned now into an invasion.
The goal is to neutralize the military potential.
We go to air tonight. Ukraine is under full-scale Russian assault.
Видаємо зброю і будемо видавати для захисту нашої землі всім бажаючим.
My name is Pierce Westfall, and I'm the Executive Director of A Jesus Mission.
Tyler Riles, and I'm a Regional Director for AJM's Ukraine Response.
Garrett Larson, and I drive vans into Ukraine.
Jordan Silva, I'm a missionary with the Jesus Mission, and I got to be a part of what God is doing here in Ukraine.
Wow. Try to picture in my mind how it happened, you know, what was happening, what did it sound like?
G'day, I'm Wayne from Ukraine, but originally from Australia. So I'm the field leader of Operation Mobilization, and I've been in Ukraine for 29 years. So I've been in Ukraine since only a year and a half after it became a free, independent country.
So the Russians were all through here, and on the 30th of March, that's when this happened?
So when the night of the 23rd came, as we had been discussing with our crisis department, I had the feeling that this possibly was going to be the last night of sleep that we got, and so I wanted to get sleep. And then the morning of the 24th, the explosions happened. Early in the morning, we woke up, 5 o'clock, started checking the news, and yep, it had started. So basically, the full-scale invasion of Ukraine, pretty much to the full extent of what on any Richter scale was being thrown at Ukraine. With it starting, we clicked into what were our plans. We had multiple contingency plans, which had meant for us that we had gathered fuel, we'd stocked up on cash, and that meant preparing for ministry in a country at war.
I came out to Romania the first week of March with Pierce Westfall and Jordan Silva.
My family and I came out to Romania to see what the need was about the first week into the war, and to really see how we as a family and as a Jesus Mission could respond to the crisis that was happening in Ukraine. I had no idea what to expect when I came out here. My wife and my two girls, we just came out here and we said, let's see what God is doing, how he's moving amongst his people, and if there's any way we can help. People deserve to be able to have a place they call their home, dear Lord. And so
When I got off the plane to help out with this ministry, I didn't really know what to expect. Coming in and just knowing that I know how to drive stick and I have a heart to serve people was just all I knew at the time. And it grew from driving into war-torn areas to now driving to the front lines and serving people that are actively getting bombed.
I didn't really have a lot of expectations when it came to coming out here. I knew we were coming out to help the refugee crisis, but I was really unsure of what that was going to look like.
What can we do? You know, initially it was just our family, and then as Pierce and others came out with their family, it was a very small group of people here just really praying and seeking the Lord, saying, God, how can we help? How can we even begin to think about meeting needs of 44 million people when we're just this little handful of obedient believers?
One of the first things that was pretty apparent is when we got here and we traveled up to the border in Suceava, there was a lot of response there. At first we thought we were going to do refugee care up there, but we realized that that was where the bulk of the response was already happening. And so to us, the realization was that there were two big needs. One was the transit refugee care in some of the other big cities of Romania, and the other one being van drivers that would bring food into Ukraine.
So a major wave of people moving west and coming back with something. And then as that began to dry up and it became clear that the Russian forces had left the northern, that whole northern part of Ukraine, that opened up brand new opportunities, which is where, that's where you guys came in. You arrived at just that time when the aid was just starting to come, and it was a beautiful thing at our church on the night that I'd returned to our location, which was only pretty much a day after the Russians had left the northern outskirts of Kiev. We had 5 organizations turn up, and we had a meeting in the dark in front of the church over martial law curfew. Got a call from the mayor's office. If we see that there's something happening in front of the church there, we're not going to do anything about it, but turn your lights off and get out of there.
Our expectations at the beginning were definitely one van, maybe me and my friend Jordan can drive it into Ukraine. Maybe we can take some food directly to people. We had no visions of this being some sort of convoy that would keep going out. And understanding there's very few people that can go into Ukraine, that can drive up to the front lines and could put food right in the hands of people, or maybe very few people willing to do that. And I think we just had a team of people that were willing.
The reality of need in Ukraine became more and more real, and just the ability that maybe we can go help. So at first it's just, okay, let's get a van. Let's see if we can, raise enough funds to, to buy a van. And then that turned from 1 van to 3 to 7. And then it went from a team of, 4 or 5 people out here to 50. And so time and time again, we watched God provide. As the need grew, so did God's provisions.
We've really not fundraised actually for this very much at all. Like, we've shared when people ask, or if opportunities come up, absolutely. Maybe a Facebook post here or there, but like, we've watched the Lord provide hundreds of thousands of dollars, and it's just all going straight to Ukraine, and it continues to come in, and we'll continue to go out as long as there's money to fill vans.
The way that we've responded and attempted to try to meet that need in Ukraine as a Jesus mission is we have bought 7 vans, which is insane. The Lord provided us with money. The Lord provided us with partners in Romania that helped us buy the vans. And then we went from having a small room under our apartments to basically having this big warehouse full of food. And we've just watched it grow from me and Jordan essentially at first saying, hey, we'll drive into Ukraine, to that team growing at times to having 15 drivers, where every single one of them is willing to drive anywhere in Ukraine. And we've just watched basically the Lord bring from nothing. Like what was nothing when we started, it was just kind of like, hey, it'd be cool if we did this. And it's gotten to the point where we've now sent 2 full diesel trucks into Ukraine, one of them to Mykolaiv, like right on the front lines. Altogether, I believe we've brought over 160,000 pounds of food with our little van team into Ukraine. It's pretty rad.
Initially, okay, it's just us. But then you start making contacts and networking and realize, no, God's working in so many different people and so many different organizations and churches. And they were small. It's just small responses that initially looked like they were just a drop in the bucket. And by themselves, they are. But as God would multiply that, we began to see, oh, he's meeting the needs of an entire country through just the hands of a few obedient people at a time. A little group here, a little group there, networking as the church should do, as the church should be that force for good, for helping. God was moving in his people, and we got to be a part of that. How awesome is that?
It's always awkward. It's a video, but yet people are acting like it's a picture.
I feel like in seasons like this, you see God move so vibrantly, and you just realize that if Christians were the first people to run to the front lines of any crisis, like God is just there. He's already present. He's just waiting for people to like partner, hold hand in hand with him to see what he wants to do amongst people. And really the Christians should be the people that are stepping up. Like our lives are secure. They're supposed to be. We say they are. Like we're secure in Christ and where we go after this life. And so I want a Jesus mission to be known for that. I want us to be people that aren't risk averse. We're not afraid of what could happen to us in this temporary life here on earth, but rather we're the people that run to crisis and we glorify God among the way and make him known amongst his people.
If the gospel is not relevant when everything is going bad, then it's not relevant at all. And we are seeing the children of God shining very brightly at this time.
I believe I can hear voice of God. I understand very clear my place here with my people in my city, and this very important for me personally be here. We have really good work, many possibilities, preach gospel. I believe in kingdom of heaven. And for me, very important working in this side. Why I stay here? Biggest movement it will be before Jesus comes. My name Oleg Sherbakov. I am senior pastor, New Testament Church, City Nikolaev, Ukraine. It's very interesting. All churches prayer. Every time I have many calling from different countries, and many believers begin helping for people who live in Ukraine. It was incredible helping, and God's very near. And we have difficulties, and God's presence much bigger, like normally time. Just now we live every day under shadow of death, and we live in God's presence. And God's very close, and we understand, and soldiers want we pray together, and people want pray together, and people looking on us and have questions what we must do. And we can possibility testimony about Jesus. And we understand Jesus much bigger like all this situation. And we see real unity church. Many believers begin really pray and see on different reality, supernatural reality.
Ukraine churches like come together incredibly.
The Ukrainian church is salt and light to this entire situation. Like, they are the force for good in that country, and it's the most incredible thing to see. I'd say the same thing about the Romanian church, where it's just like, it reminds me so much of the early church, where it's just like, the early church was known for caring for the orphans, for caring for the widows. They were the ones caring for the sick, and you're seeing that on full display here. By just meeting the needs of the people, the gospel is going out time and time again. We're hearing testimonies of people hearing of the Lord daily because they just care. They really just care, and they're the force for good in that country.
The church was always supposed to be the place where Christ was shown the most clearly. Like, his bride was supposed to be where the unity of all these different people with different backgrounds and lifestyles would come together under one name, the bride of Christ, and shine for Jesus across the world. When you see that happen, when you see that in Ukraine and in Romania and Hungary and Poland, these churches that are all neighbors, and then a lot of ways maybe didn't always have this unity, but because of this war have really come together, put their differences aside to be one church to meet this need. Man, there's nothing like it in the world to see Christ work through his bride as he intended.
И ничего не надо больше. Сам Господь, сам Господь, ходит посреди него. Благодать его, изливается немерой. Сам Господь.
The bulk of the work, like especially on the front lines, especially where it's needed most, was being done by the church in Ukraine. The reality is, and this isn't like a condemnation of the bigger NGOs, but they're a bigger organization. They take a long time to get moving and get into places where immediately when the war broke out, the church responded. The church was one of the main ways that we could ensure, like by us working with the church, that we knew that food was getting to people that absolutely needed it. And the church was, especially early in the war, responsible for the vast majority of that. And that was probably the most beautiful part of what we got to experience, was, in a sense, watching the Lord revive his church. I've said it to a few people that the story of what we've done in Ukraine is not us idiots driving vans and saving Ukraine. Obviously, we didn't do that. But the story of what's happened in Ukraine is God revives his church in the midst of tragedy. And that when two pastors in Ukraine meet, it's no longer, what are your thoughts on this doctrine? Or what are your thoughts on the gifts of the Spirit? But it's just, oh, you believe in Jesus, you need food, we'll work together. And watching the church be unified in the midst of a really difficult time was beautiful to see.
So as you can imagine, you've been watching the war unfold on your screens, and you've been seeing the atrocities of places like Mariupol and Irpin and Bucha. And we went to Borodyanka, and you saw the exploded buildings that of no military value, but lives just snuffed out, dozens of lives as an aerial bomb takes out, the whole center part of a building that's just collapsed. So I just want to share a couple of stories of some of the key things that we've picked up in Chernigov, where it was a bumpy trip because the bridge had been blown out, and we went through the military reserve to get to that church where only 10 days earlier they had been under siege. And to hear that pastor, to hear the story of what had happened in their church and through their church, in that we call it a micro region in Chernigov of 3,000 people, where the evangelicals had never been accepted as a spiritual entity in a highly, very previously pro-Russian Orthodox situation. And there were dozens of people that spent their wartime in that church basement, and now a brand new, vibrant community of Jesus followers with a new war closeness culture has materialized. And it's a beautiful thing to see what the Lord's doing. Will aid continue to be a part of the story? Yes, it may, but it's a part of the puzzle where we continue to empower them to be the hands and feet of Jesus. And so this pastor shared that we arrived and they actually had still a little bit of aid left from someone else that had brought something, but he said, you guys are giving us hope that we can have some sort of continuity in this continuing ministry in this micro region of 3,000 people, where suddenly we are the spiritual entity. And so the locals now walk past that little Baptist church and they do the sign of the cross, and they keep walking. Whereas before that would never happen. So now something deep and beautiful is happening. Ivan Rusin, who's the rector of the Ukrainian Evangelical Theological Seminary, he's a board member in OM, so we have a special missiology connection there. And he's from Bucha, and he was trapped in Bucha during the first days of the war. And then he actually went back into Bucha while it was still occupied to help people, which was, you got to see what happened to people in Bucha who were caught out in the streets. But the question that was posed is a little bit like, you've got that song that says, where were you when they crucified my Lord? And the question the Ukrainian people are asking is, where were you when they crucified us? And that's how we feel right now. As lives, tens of thousands of lives are being snuffed out. The beauty of the gospel is a gospel that is like God himself. He's the suffering God. He enters into his world to suffer with the people. And just like Jesus was crucified on a cross, he did that willingly. And the children of God, as we see in the scriptures, there is a suffering theology of suffering, where the fragrance of Christ is made beautiful as lives are being destroyed. And God brings beautiful fruit out of that. And God was protecting us.
І коли була після
So there's three buildings like that, and I
Я
live
там
in,
живу третій будинок.
so I live in the third
От
building.
When we give people food, we're not just giving them food. We're saying that there's more, that like this act of love that we do is not just because we want them just to have their bellies filled for a few more days or weeks or months. That's good and that's right. But that's not the end. Like the reality is we're saying that this is just going to sustain you for a little while. Then you're going to be hungry again. You're going to be thirsty again. But there is a bread, there is a living water that will actually sustain you for all eternity. And his name is Jesus. And so by coming under the local church, partnering with the local Ukrainian, Romanian church, we can be the tool that they get to use to pass out the food and distribute life to people and share Jesus with them, so that this is something that meets their immediate physical need, but also their eternal spiritual need.
The Christians have been effective and fast, meeting needs right from the beginning, and aid was a natural extension of this is how the body of Christ works. It gets passed. Someone has this idea, we can do this, and it gets passed, and then it gets to the places that is needed. And so we are, the Christians were acknowledged very early on as effective participants or players in the local communities, all throughout the whole country.
It was really a miracle. I have one call, we Jesus Mission, and we want help you. I don't know these people not know me before, and just now we're very good friends. And these people come in difficult time, very dangerous places, and we was in some villages, some places were real dangerous. And this mission very interesting, very brave people, and really big heart, and really good working. And we really helping people, and much bigger possibility to preach gospel.
Going into is more dangerous than the area that we were in yesterday, where we went through 1 or 2 military checkpoints. We're going to go through a dozen or more today. Father, you are so good. And we really aren't worthy of this task. But thank you for bringing us here. Thank you for the opportunity to do your work. Father, I pray for your protection over our convoy. Pray that the vans get through without any trouble. And I pray that we'll be able to reach our destination and complete this mission with total success. And I pray that you will be glorified with all this.
My best friend, my business partner, went in to extract people, to give them food. So it wasn't an extraction. It was to take them food for people that didn't want to be extracted. Got his van shot up, miraculously survived, and God kept him alive.
We risk our lives to bring people food because Jesus says that if you seek to keep your life, you're going to lose it. And if you lose your life, you'll gain it. And that, like, he wasn't sarcastic when he said that. And it's a literal fact. Like, when you lay aside your ambitions and your dreams and everything that you want to do, and then you selflessly try to seek what the Lord wants you to do, that in that you find joy and life.
Early on here in Romania, my wife and I, we sat down with our 9-year-old, our 6-year-old, both girls, Faye and Ember, and we just told them, like, there's real risk involved. If Dad's going to go into Ukraine, he's going to take food in. This is real, you know, and wanted them to understand the dynamic of that. And at the end of that conversation, I remember just us asking Faye, like, do you get it? Do you understand, like, why Dad has to go into Ukraine? Does that make sense to you? And Faye just looked at us and she was like, yeah, because it's better for you to risk your life than know people will starve to death and do nothing about it. And that just struck so deep with me and my wife that, like, she gets it. She had words that we didn't even have at the time for it.
So this upside down kingdom that God has made for his church to walk in, it's good, it's right, it's worth it. Step out and go and serve people and love people. And that's why we bring food to people, knowing that it could cost us everything. But in that potential loss, we gain the true everything. Jim Elliot said he is no fool who gives what he cannot keep to gain what he cannot lose. That's a reality that he walked in. The church is called to continually, daily walk in that.
The reason why I risk my life to bring people food is because I can't just be home in my comfortable life knowing that these people have to scrounge for every meal that they have and end up eating things that you and I would never want to eat just to stay alive. Knowing that they're going through this, knowing that they're suffering and that their family members are dying, like, I want to help in some way, and it's worth the risk.
So the teaching of Jesus is very clear. He says, greater love has no man than this, than a man lay down his life for his friends. I have seen that. And sometimes you see miracles of salvation of the extraction working, and sometimes totally different. We've seen Christians die. We know of people that have stayed and they've been doing very brave stuff. There you go. But in the end, we're all going to die, and you're all going to be asked the question of, what did you do with Jesus? And then what did Jesus ask you to do? And the life of Jesus through us is, I lay down my life for the people around me that God has given. And sometimes you do what people do when they defend their country. They go and they lay down their lives for people they don't even know, because that's what Jesus does.
The real heroes are seriously the nobodies. Genuinely, it is the people that you would least expect stepping up. It's literally moms and dads, single people, grandparents back home that are going literally like, we could do something, we could have an impact. And it's people from around the world that are stepping up and going, I could bite off a small piece here and I could have a contribution. And all of that together is what's made the impact. It's not some large organizations. We're 3 months in and haven't seen very many large organizations step in. It's a bunch of nobodies literally coming together, and God is just doing something incredible through it.
This is obviously God's story. So he's the hero of this. This is all him moving and working. He gets the glory for this whole situation. And what's beautiful is that those that join in that say yes, that make that choice to be part of that mission, they get to share in that glory, they get to share in that reward.
The real heroes of this crisis is the local pastors and the local churches in Romania and Ukraine. When this war started, the church completely pivoted its resources. They pivoted their time. Everything that the churches were doing here in Romania and in Ukraine was somehow focused around responding to this crisis. And for us, we just drive in, we drop stuff off, but we get to go home. We get to come back, and when I say home, Romania has been home to us for 3 months. But we get to come back and have a cup of coffee, decompress. But there are pastors in Ukraine that are doing this every day, that is their life. Even we have a contact at Mykolaiv that we've been working with, and he's been doing this for 8 years. And when I meet those guys, or guys like one of our contacts, Yuri, up in Kaharliv, that have risk their lives to bring people food and to be a witness to their people. It inspires me. It really does. It convicts me of like, is my faith that big? Like, what would I do if my home was invaded? Like, or wherever I was living was invaded. Like, I have family. These guys have families, a lot of them. Like, would I cut and run, or would I do what these guys did and stay and say, like, I'll literally die so that the gospel will get out?
I don't know how to put it gently, that the church feels like some sort of country club in many aspects of it back home. And I don't say that from like a bitter place, you know, but I have seen a couple churches in this season that get it, and they're sold out, like sending as much money as they can over to help this situation, as many people as they can. And I just want the church to be vibrant again. Like, I want the church to see that, like, we come from like the wealthiest country on the earth, that literally, if just a few churches can fund everything that's been happening out here, like, man, what would it look like if the church was just revived and actually got it? So I just want to see people, their spirits lifted, and be living into mission as God's created us to be.
The reality is there is a huge need there, that what we do is nothing. It's literally a drop in the bucket. Like, we might bring people food that in that village, it might hold them over for a month. But there's 20 other villages like that. There's lots of big cities that don't have water, don't have food. And the reality is that the church in America is more than able to meet this response, especially financially. Like, we could make a huge dent. So my main question would be, what are you doing that's more important than this? Obviously, you need to be called to everything, but like, are we even willing? And there were times where I questioned my willingness to do it. When it got real and we actually bought vans, like, Ukraine was a cool idea. But when it came to actually driving into places, and there's a real gut check. But the reality is the gospel is a call to uncomfort, to suffering, to danger throughout history. You see it during the plague. You see it during every major conflict, that like, the church is called to respond to that. But oftentimes we're either numb to it or removed from it. And I just, like, that's a question we should all have, is like, is what we're doing reflecting the heart of God?
Message to the church outside of Ukraine: thank you so much for this, your initial response. It has been very helpful. It's been beautiful to see the response. You've got a little taste of what we had to do, but there's that border between us and you, where war is happening here, and you're not getting the leftovers, but you are getting those to minister to, and it's been beautiful. It's been amazing, and God will continue to change Europe. You need to play your role by harnessing what God is giving you. God moves millions of people. He does that throughout history, and there's nothing you can do about that, but you can get with God's plan. You know, he said, you will be my ministers, you know, you will be my witnesses. Where? In Jerusalem, in Judea, Samaria, and the utmost parts of the world. God moved people through persecution. Now he's moving people through war. But the point is, there are so many miracles happening here that I don't want to be anywhere else. I want to be where God is working.
I don't even know if I could pin down a moment where it's a significant God moment, like a specific thing, because I feel like it's by cloud and by fire, that we're literally just watching God do something constantly every single day. It's just been God and more God every day.
Literally every aspect of this, to me, I mean, it's hard to narrow it down to one thing. Like, this is a God thing. This is something that we don't even, I think, understand the weight of or the magnitude of. Not from us, like, not because of AJM. I'm talking about, by and large, this whole response. Every part of it, God has had his hands in it and is using it to make his name famous. And like, when you see a revived church, you know God's there. When you see churches change their fellowship halls that they worked for years to build into permanent dorms for refugees, like, God's there. And that's really the story of all of this, is God has been with us, and none of us died, so it's pretty cool too.
Number one, that you died for us, Lord. Outside of your sacrifice, outside of your death and resurrection, we have zero purpose, Lord. Watch over them, Lord. We know that your call and your plan for us does not always include safety, but we ask that it would, if it's possible, that you just keep them all safe. Bring them back.
God's always on the move. He's always moving to work. We know that. But to see that in ways that is undeniable, where you look at a situation like, okay, there's no other way this could happen unless there is an orchestrator of providence behind this whole situation. So to see God's providence and his sovereignty come through in such a visible, tangible way, sometimes even through your own life and your own hands, is like, and to watch that happen, like, this isn't me, I don't know what I'm doing, this isn't our organization, this isn't, all these people on their own, we don't have the means to do what's happening right now. This is God. Man, there's nothing like that. Like, that's where we should be as the church. That's where, this is something that shouldn't be just an offset of like, oh, where there's a war, there's a crisis, then we see God moving. This should be our day-to-day life. If we're willing to trust God and step forward in that, this is where the church should be.
This is going to fade from your news in some ways, but in other ways it can't, because the events that are happening in Ukraine are literally economically and politically affecting the entire world. The entire world. God is in this situation. What is he calling you to do? And the Western church has resources to, and in the end, we're going to stand before God just like me. Why did I not flee? Because I have a unique story here. I've been coupled to this people for the last 30 years. I cannot run. I must stay here. This is God's choice. You're from places where God has given resources, and the question will be the same question: is what did you do with what you were given? We will all give account to God. What did I do with the talents, the abilities, and the opportunities? You need to look beyond. Ask God, what is he doing in the world right now? And this is not a sprint. It's not even a marathon. This is a fight for survival of a nation that's affecting hundreds of millions of people. What is it that God's calling you to do? You get in there and you do it, and you analyze, and then you change, and you do that, and you let God work. Because if you don't, we're going to stand. And did we bury our talent? Right now, the Christian church is being asked to engage and engage and engage. And that's where we see the miracles happen. We've been praying for God to bring revival. Okay? Get with it.